Python coders. So in today's world, we usually have multiple accounts on many different sites. We've got banking, we've got credit cards, you've got all your social media, TikTok, Snapchat, Facebook, anything that you're going to need a user ID and password for. It can be kind of tricky to keep track of all of these user IDs and passwords simply because there are so many of them now. And an interesting beginner Python and beginner Qt for Python project is creating a password generator. And I've went out on the web and I've done this many, many times. There are some pretty simple password generation programs out there. But one thing that I don't see a lot of them show you is how to encrypt those passwords once you have generated them. Because if you don't encrypt your password before you store it somewhere, like let's say you store it in a JSON file or a database table or something like that, even a text file, it's going to be plain text. So anybody that gets a hold of that might have access to all of your user IDs and passwords. So let's take a look at a fairly simple encryption scheme and make this a little bit bigger. There we go. And what we're going to do is I am importing from the cryptography library, I'm going to import FAIRNet. And FAIRNet is a fairly simple but pretty sophisticated encryption method for encrypting data within a Python program. First thing I need to do is I need to generate a key. And so I'm going to use the generate key method out of FAIRNet to generate myself a key. And then we'll print it for demonstration. Then I'm going to create a FAIRNet object, okay, and I'm going to pass in the key. And then I'm just going to use my name. So I have a string here, which I'm going to change to bytes, which is going to be my name with UTF-8 encoding. So to encrypt my name, I'm going to have a variable called name encrypted. That's going to equal fairnet.encrypt, and then I pass in the name. To decrypt it, I'll create a variable called name decrypted, and that's going to equal fairnet.decrypt, and I'm going to pass in what I want to decrypt. Then I change that back to a regular string using the built-in string method. All right, so let's go ahead and run this. And you'll see that we get our key, which is also a binary string. Then we have the name encrypted. So this is just my first name, Jason, and this is what it encrypts, or this is the result of doing the encryption. And then after I decrypt that, I get my name Jason back. So fairly powerful, kind of difficult to crack under some good circumstances. But one mistake that I see a lot of people do if they're going to encrypt this data is, what do I do with the keys? Because if you lose this key, there is a very slim chance that you will ever be able to get this data back. So keeping the keys in a safe place is incredibly important. I have a friend of mine that does a lot of cryptography, and he stores a lot of his keys on a USB stick. So they're totally and completely separate from the application itself. You don't necessarily have to go that far if you're making just a home application, but you do want to make sure that you're not storing the keys in the same place as the encrypted data. Then it would be very simple for somebody to decrypt what you've encrypted. And of course, the entire purpose of encryption is to not make it easy for people to see the plain text. All right, so what about a simple password generator? Well, I've got a couple here. And this one does no encryption. It's just fairly simple. So we import a library called secrets. This is going to help us do the random generation. We import string. And then what I do here is I make three variables: letters, digits, and special characters. So that comes from the string library. So it's going to be string ASCII letters, string digits, 0 through 9, and then string dot punctuation. So that's going to be our special characters. Our alphabet is going to be all three of these mixed together. I set a password length. In this case, I'm saying 128 bytes. And then I just have a simple for loop here to create a simple password by continuously adding on to that password until we get to 128 bytes. So I use secrets.choice to pull a selection out of this alphabet variable. And then at the end, I'll print the password. So if we run this, we get a 128 byte password. And of course, I can control the length by changing this variable here. So if I didn't want a password that was so large, now I just have a 10. And then it's this that I could take and then run through an encryption algorithm to encrypt this, such as Fairnet. So let's go ahead and do that. In our password generator 2, I'm doing just that. So once I get the password generated, then I actually go ahead and encrypt it using that same method that I talked about before. So now here is my original 128 byte password, and here is the encrypted version of that. And you'll notice that the encrypted version is going to be longer. So whenever you're going to store these passwords, if you're generating very long, complicated passwords, you're going to want to make sure you have enough space to be able to hold them. I also noticed when I was doing some research for this topic that there is a third-party library that you can actually import called Password Generator. And so I went through the same encryption, which is first we're going to create our Fairnet key, and then we'll create a Fairnet object, and then I'm going to create a password generator object, and then I'm going to set a couple of properties on it. And if you look at the website for this, there's actually several different properties that you can set, like the minimum length, the maximum length, minimum uppercase characters, minimum lowercase characters, minimum numbers, and minimum special characters. I thought that was pretty nice, actually. And so we're going to then generate a password. I'll print it out, and then I'm going to encrypt it. Okay, let's go ahead and run this. And so here's our key. Here is our password. This is ridiculously random, which is what it's supposed to be. And then here is the encrypted password itself. And this is what we would actually want to store someplace to be able to decrypt for later. So as an interesting PyQt project, what you could do is you could take something like this, and I'll leave it on the screen if you want to grab a screenshot of it or something. You could take this and build an interface in Qt to be able to look at your saved user IDs and passwords. And in an ideal world, you would also want to encrypt the user ID. So if you're building like a database table to store user IDs and passwords, you could encrypt the user ID, and then you could generate a password, encrypt that, write it out to the database. And again, you're going to have to store the key in a different location, and you don't want to lose the key. If you lose the key, it's pretty much all over for you, because I don't think there's going to be any chance in this century that you're ever going to get that data back. So anyway, like I said, not a very complicated project, but if you're beginning in Python, or if you're beginning in Qt, this is a good little project you can whip up. It's not too difficult. And like I said, you can build an interface for this so that you can keep track of your user IDs and passwords. All right, any questions or comments? please leave them in the comments section. And other than that, happy coding.